Tomorrow's Tes Kislev. Tes Kislev is the Yemeledes and the Yartzeit Hilula of the Mitteler Rebbe. The Mitteler Rebbe is the only one of the Siyach Chabad who begashmis bepashtus was nostalgic on his birthday. Like the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu memale yemeim u'shneseim shel tzadikim meyem leyem. The Gemara says, Moshe Rabbeinu, hayem mol yom ha'ishneisai, that tzadikim live perfect years. They pass away on their birthday. Now, if you would be a scholarette, as many of you are, you would know that if you live perfect years, you should pass away the day before your birthday. Because the day of your birthday, you already said the new kapitel. It's the first day of the next year. Now, there's perfect years. If they start Zayin Oder, they should end Vova, they're not Zayin Oder. And the answer is Ein Shiltein B'Yom HaMoves. The day that a person passes away is not a part of his life. That's why it says, Moshe Rabbeinu, Ein Shiltein B'Yom HaMoves. On the day of death, you have no control. It's already like it's the end of life. The last day of the person's life is already not part of the life. It's like the Aliyah. Right? Every Shabbos is Aliyah of a week. Every Yom Kippur is Aliyah of a year. Every Yartzeit is Aliyah of a lifetime. The Rebbe once mentioned that when Mashiach is going to come and Achei Temimim is going to happen, one of the most important days in every person's life is going to be their Yartzeit. Because you can have Aliyahs after Achei Temimim also. And on the Yartzeit you have the biggest Aliyah. It's like a Shabbos for a whole life. And that's the cheshbon. A person passed away on his birthday. It's not complete years. It's complete years plus one. In addition, Wednesday, which is Yud Kislev, is the Chag HaGeula of the Mitteler Rebbe. When Alter Rebbe was released from his incarceration, the Mitteler Rebbe was not really imprisoned like the Alter Rebbe was the first time. The Alter Rebbe, when he was arrested, the second time he was not held as a prisoner. He was held as a guest of the government that was doing scrutiny of his activities. The Alter Rebbe the first time was put in a dungeon like a common prisoner in the what's called the Petropavlovsky, the Peter Paul Fortress, which is Adayei Mazeh in Petersburg. You can go visit it. The second time around, he stayed in the houses, what's called Tanya Soviet. I don't know what that means, but it's on the mainland. If you've ever been to Leningrad is a city. It's cut through by the Neva River. Leningrad has thousands of bridges, because every street has a bridge, because the river cuts through the city like a snake. The Peter Paul Fortress is surrounded completely by water, right in the middle of a city. And the reason they did this was a fortress to protect the king. An early warning: the waters run very fast, and there's a drawbridge that drops and goes up, that allows you to go to the island. And that's what Alter Rebbe was held the first time. And that's why you have the famous story with Kiddush Lavana, who was taken from the fortress to the mainland for a cross-examination. But the second time he was taken to Petersburg, he was not held in a fortress. He was given housing. The government gave him government-sponsored housing with Alter Rebbe stage for the time that they were doing the research. The Mitteler Rebbe was not taken to Petersburg. He was taken to Vitebsk. The Mitteler Rebbe was not taken to the federal head of state, to the federal capital, but to the state capital of the gubernia, that means the state in which Lubavitch was. And sometimes it says the gubernia of Mogilov or Mohilov, or the hey in Russia, hey and the gimel are interchangeable. And sometimes it says Vitebsk gubernia, the gubernia, the state of Vitebsk. I don't know how that works, Mogilov or Vitebsk. I don't understand geography at all, but it's one or the other. It was a local thing. It was a statewide arrest. And the Mitteler Rebbe was not arrested. He was invited to come, but he was given the kind of invitation that you couldn't refuse it. You had to come. It was a respectful way of being arrested. And it says in the Hayem Yem that when the Mitteler Rebbe traveled, I think it's in the Hayem Yem of Yud Kislev, yeah? Today they retyped the Hayem Yem. I tell you, they should have left the Hayem Yem alone. The Rebbe's not happy with all these shinuyim. It says, this is Yud Kislev's Hayem Yem. Admoram Tzah Yotzal Acheidas Tovkuf Bezayin Mimasrei Be'er Vitebsk. Mitteler Rebbe was released from his arrest in the city of Vitebsk on Yud Kislev. And here's what it says. B'chayil hamayit Sukkos and Chalamayid. B'chayil hamayit Sukkos Noida. During Chalamayid Sukkos it became known, Asher Hilshinu es Admoram Tzah, that they massa, that they informed against the Mitteler Rebbe. B'yem Aleph Pashas Neach, on Monday of Pashas Neach, which was Chav Ches Tishrei. he was invited. Nosa Bolivia's Pekidim. He traveled with government agents from Lubavitch. Sunday of Pashas Ne'echov Chas Tishrei, he traveled. B'tzarayim bol DovBer Missel. That night, Sunday night, he came to DovBer Missel. What do you do when you're arrested and you were taken by the government to the capital of Vitebsk? Omer Sham Chassidus. The Mitteler Rebbe said Chassidus that Sunday night. Ma'im Rabbi. Yoim Beis Nosem Mishamad Liyazne, which is very close by. Monday they came to Liyazne. And again he said, Ma'im Chassidus Rishpe Yesh. On Tuesday he came to Vitebsk. Tuesday, that means Lamed Tishrei, I'm assuming. Ve'yoshav Sham Tofos, he was held here under arrest at Yom Aleph until Sunday, Vayishlach, which is Ches Tes Kislev, Yud Kislev, which is in 2 days from today. So, the next 2 days, tomorrow and the day after, is the whole life of the Mitteler Rebbe in 2 days. On Tes Kislev he was born and he passed away, and Yud Kislev is the day of the Chag of the Mitteler Rebbe. And I'm sure you heard that the Mitteler Rebbe's Yom Tif of Yud Kislev is not as celebrated as much as Yud Tes Kislev is. And the reason b'derech hateva is because the Pashat passed away before there was an opportunity to celebrate it. But the explanation that was always given was, and it says even in the Yom Yom, that he was released from prison the 10th of Kislev in the year 5587, and he passed away the 9th of Kislev 5588, 1 year later minus a day. In other words, the first Chag HaGeula of the Mitteler Rebbe was 1 day after he passed away. But in the Rebbe's journal, the Rebbe's diary, which is now in print, the Frierdiker Rebbe told the Rebbe that we're actually not sure. We're not sure whether the Mitteler Rebbe was arrested and released 1 year before he passed away or 2 years before he passed away. And the Rebbe in his journal made a cheshbon. The Rebbe sits in his own, you can see it in the Rebbe's diary, how the Rebbe is writing to himself, that both Tov Kuf Pei Vav, that means 2 years before the Rebbe passed away, 1825, and Tov Kuf Pei Zayin, 1 year before he passed away, 1826, Tes Kislev was Shabbos, 2 years in a row, same kviyas of the days of the week, Tes Kislev was Shabbos and Yud Kislev was Sunday, because there's a story about that the Mitteler Rebbe was in the middle of saying Chassidus. When they wanted to tell him that he's free, it was Shabbos afternoon, he was saying Chassidus. They didn't want to interrupt him, so by the time they told him Shabbos is already over, otherwise his Chag HaGeula would have been like by the Frierdiker Rebbe, also on his Yom Haledes. With Lepel, he was told only on Yud Kislev, and Yud Kislev became the Chag HaGeula. But we now know from documents that were printed by Lubavitch about 34 years ago. They found a full file of the Mitteler Rebbe's arrest and liberation in Russia. It's not the main file, it's a secondary file, but it's still a full file with all the notes. And they printed a 200-page book in Hebrew, which is Ma'aser Ge'ulas Admor Emtzai. Bet 11 had it translated and he published it. And in that booklet, there's a lot of letters and documents, Russian documents, and Lahavdal Avdal's Teda, Chassidim documents of the Mitteler Rebbe. And it's very clear that the Mitteler Rebbe was released from prison not 1 year before he passed away, but 2. Tov Kuf Pei Vav. So we always say that he passed away 1 year before. The documents show, but the Rabbeim all said there was a suffix. We were not sure, and the documents now reveal that he was released from prison 2 years before he passed away, which creates the question again: if he was released from prison 2 years before he passed away, so there was a Yud Kislev to celebrate. Tov Kuf Pei Zayin, there should have been a big celebration, a big fabrengen. Why did Tov Kuf Pei Zayin? Why did Yud Kislev not become the same Yom Tov as Yud Tes Kislev? And the answer, the way I understand it, is because the Mitteler Rebbe, when he let him go, he wasn't free. It wasn't like the Alter Rebbe, it was over, you know. But the Mitteler Rebbe, they were breathing on his neck. They let him go home. But the government of Russia was in the Mitteler Rebbe's hair, mamish, till after he passed away. There's a document that officially vindicates him, which I think is dated Yud Gimel Kislev Tov Kuf Pei Ches. 4 days after he passed away, they wrote, yeah, you're not guilty. But they were bothering the Mitteler Rebbe. And the issue that they were bothering him about was about money. The Mitteler Rebbe raised a lot of money and he gave a lot of stock. He was a Rebbe. And the Mesira against him, the libel against him, was that he was being irresponsible with money, he was taking people's money and spending it on himself, that whole kind of thing. The Mitteler Rebbe had to defend himself, which he did. The way the story goes is that the judge literally threw the case out. The Mitteler Rebbe sat opposite his accuser. And the Mitteler Rebbe made a joke out of the guy. It was so bad that the judge said they told the other side to get out of the court. He threw the case out. It was a not case. And von deswegen, the government of Russia continued to meddle in the Mitteler Rebbe's affairs. The previous Rebbe told our Rebbe, and it's in the Rebbe's journal, that we were considered Ezrach Nich, what did they say? The Chabad Rabbeim, from the times of the Tzemach Tzedek, I think, were considered honorary citizens. We had a citation, the Frierdiker Rebbe had in his possession a piece of paper, which meant that the government had to help him in any way possible, because they had from the Tsar, from the Keser Alein, from the Tsar, a note which said that they're honorable, special citizens. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says to our Rebbe, we were given all this covet, but we were always afraid. In other words, officially they were honored, but in truth their government was looking at them, they were afraid of them, because the Rabbeim had real power. And they were always sort of breathing down their necks. The Frierdiker Rebbe said we always knew we couldn't be careful, we couldn't trust that the government was going to respect us. Chachafilu, the government gave us, the king of Russia, gave the Lubavitcher Rebbeim a citation that said, a note, a shtar, which said that they were honorable, special citizens. So the Mitteler Rebbe was the Mitteler Rebbe's arrest affected him deeply. But there was something else. And this something else is the segue to the Mitteler Rebbe's Histalkus, which is what we're going to be talking about. The Canonisten. I'm sure you've all heard of the Gazette of the Canonisten. It's a terrible decree. And the Mitteler Rebbe said about the Gazette of the Canonisten, quote, Ich kenn das nicht, I can't handle it. Mitteler Rebbe had a very difficult Nesias. He was a Rebbe for 15 years only. And he said Chassidus until the walls platzed. But it was a very difficult Nesias. There was a lot of tzaras. And the Mitteler Rebbe dealt with those tzaras very practically. The Mitteler Rebbe, even though he himself was in the clouds, but the Mitteler Rebbe put himself into Askonos. The Mitteler Rebbe was incredibly involved in helping Yidden in Russia in a very, very difficult time. After the war with Napoleon, when Russia was destroyed, when White Russia was destroyed. But when it came to the Canonist, the Mitteler Rebbe said, I can't, it's too much. And there's a whole Rishima, which I talked about to another group of girls, Al Machon Bekitzer, where the Mitteler Rebbe was sitting at a Fabrengen with Chassidim, and he was in a very good mood. Because the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim were big Chassidim, and they were saying Chassidus, and they were Fabrengen. And suddenly the Mitteler Rebbe sees his father, the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe says to him, why are you so happy? Why are you in such a good mood? So the Mitteler Rebbe says, why am I in such a good mood? I'm sitting with Chassidim, we're speaking Divrei Elokim Chaim Chassidus, why shouldn't I be happy? So the Alter Rebbe said, don't you know that there's a Gezerah L'mayla that they're planning to take away Yiddish Kinderlach for 25 years of labor, slave service in the Russian army. It's a terrible decree. And the Mitteler Rebbe didn't know about this, and of course it upset him very much. 7 years passed, and the Gezerah didn't happen. So the Mitteler Rebbe thought the Gezerah was in his battle. So again he was sitting with Chassidim, and they were Fabrengen, and the Mitteler was in a very, very good mood, and he sees his father. And his father says to him, why are you so happy? He said, why am I so happy? I'm sitting with Chassidim, with Mishtasheh, with Divrei Teira, with Divrei Dach, Divrei Elokim Chayim, the world of the Mitteler Rebbe, Pnimi Satera. Why should we not rejoice? And the Alter Rebbe says, but I already told you. It is a Gezerah, they're going to take away Yiddish Kinderlach to serve in the Russian army for 25 years. And the Mitteler Rebbe said, so much time passed since you came to me last, I thought that the Gezerah was over. And the Alter Rebbe says, no, it's not over, it's happening. And the Mitteler Rebbe, the thing that, if you can't say about a Rebbe what broke him, when the Mitteler Rebbe decided he's going to leave for the Tzemach Tzedek for his son-in-law and successor, the Canonist and the Mitteler Rebbe said, I can't. And considering the arrest and the fact that they were breathing down his neck, plus he saw the Gezerah Canonist started at the very end of his life, do we actually have a maimer from the Mitteler Rebbe with the Diber HaMaschil, Lahoven Inyan Lekichas Anshe Chaim of Bnei Yisrael. So my Chassidus, to explain up here Chassidus why the government made such a gezerah, to take Yiddish children into work in the army. And the basic explanation that he gives is that the Eibishter wants to see if we love Torah mitzvahs. So if life is too easy and too good for too long, he tests us to see if we really like it. That's what the Mitteler Rebbe said. In Tafshin Chavdal, 1964, the Rebbe reviewed that maimer. And he said that Hashem tests us. It's enough tests. He already got his answer. He should stop testing. He knows already that Jews are not going to abide to the mitzvahs. If he tests us too much, it's also no good. The Rebbe said that. He repeated that maimer from the Mitteler Rebbe, and then he said that in one of the sichos. So what happened was the Mitteler Rebbe traveled to his father's Tzion in Haditch, which is in a very different part of Russia. Haditch is much deeper into Russia. In other words, further south, further east. It's closer to the Ukraine. Mitteler Rebbe, Lubavitch is very close to Lyozna, which is White Russia. And I'm assuming that this trip had to do with the Gezerah Chassidim. Mitteler Rebbe said he wanted out. He wanted to push it, quit. He wanted to leave it to somebody else. And he came out of his father's tzin in Haditch, and he said, the Tatne hat me befreit von der Rabbonis. The Tat hat mir abgesagt von der Rabbonis. My father pardoned me from the Rabbonis. I don't have to be a Rav anymore. The Mitteler Rebbe was in his 54th year. He was 53 years old. He passed away on his 54th birthday. So everybody was thinking that the Mitteler Rebbe is planning to move to Eretz Yisrael. The Mitteler Rebbe was very into Eretz Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe sent Chassidim to Eretz Yisrael. The Mitteler Rebbe sent his own children to Eretz Yisrael. A lot of the mishpachas, a lot of Choshev Chassidim Anash moved to Eretz Yisrael by the Mitteler Rebbe's behest. So people, no one could imagine that he was going to pass away. He was a young man. He came out of his father's tzin and said, "The Tatat, my father freed me from the Rabbonis." And he started to travel back to Lubavitch. And he got sick. And he ended up in the city of Nezhin, which is also in the Ukraine, Nezhin. Nezhin is not that far from where the Alter Rebbe is buried in Haditch. If you do the tours, you do the tours to the Kvarim. I did the tours twice. So you see Haditch and then Nezhin and Berditchev and then Mezhe, but you can do them all in one trip. I was recruited to sort of be the mashpia on such a trip, so that was one trip. And then Lubavitch is a different trip, because this is Russia and this is really the Ukraine. Or it's called whatever, it's the Ukraine. The Mitteler Rebbe he stopped in Nezhin. And as the time went on, he got sicker and sicker. And the story is mamish hafel b'fella. The story of the Mitteler Rebbe's Histalkus is pushed not to be believed. It's not a normal story at all. Now the Mitteler Rebbe, from what I understand, I don't know this for sure, but when I understand it, he was born with sick lungs. The Mitteler Rebbe gelitten of the Red. The Mitteler Rebbe suffered with respiration. He had respiratory trouble. It's hard for him to breathe. And I don't think this happened later in life. I think he was born that way. He suffered. We know as a fact that the Alter Rebbe guarded his health. Alter Rebbe would breathe down his neck. You eat and sleep. Don't get religious on me, you know. The Alter Rebbe was so afraid that the Mitteler Rebbe had fasten or had praven sigufim. The Alter Rebbe watched him. Alter Rebbe watched the Mitteler Rebbe, and he made sure that he didn't fast and he didn't stay up. Alter Rebbe watched the Mitteler Rebbe's gesund much better than the Mezitcher Maggid watched Avram the Malach's health. You understand? Avram the Malach passed away at 37. The Mezitcher Maggid the Mitteler Rebbe was an old man compared to that. He passed away at 54. Alter Rebbe shtagihid the Mitteler Rebbe's gesund. We know stories. Alter Rebbe watched. He was very afraid of the Mitteler Rebbe's health. But he suffered from his lungs. Now you would imagine a person who suffers from his lungs would have a hard time speaking. But the Mitteler Rebbe could speak Chassidus for 10 hours without stopping. 15 hours. There's two versions of the story. The one is that the most was 17 hours. Another version, the most was 19 hours. You try to talk for 17 hours straight. And to say something that's logical and thought through for the middle and beginning and an end, you have to be a brain that's not normal. The Mitteler Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe says about the Mitteler Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe's cup, wer kennt das? The Frierdiker Rebbe was a pretty smart man, yeah. The Mitteler Rebbe's head, who could imagine such a head? Apparently it looks like that the Rabbeim held that the Mitteler Rebbe was even smarter than the Alter Rebbe. That Mitteler Rebbe's cup. Mitteler Rebbe's cup, wer kennt das?
How long was he Rebbe for?
15 years, a very short Nasius. It was a time warp. The Mitteler Rebbe didn't live on this earth. They were like in this cocoon of holiness.
Was it exciting Chassidus?
Huh?
Was it like exciting Chassidus?
I don't know how Chassidus is exciting. Chassidus is exciting if you're smart and tuned in. You know, it's.
Was it like possible for everyone, or was it like?
How long can you concentrate? I grew up around the Rebbe. I couldn't keep track from beginning to the end of one sikha. And sikha are not hard as Maimorim. And the Maimid is, the Mitteler's Maimorim can be hours. They were giants. The Mitteler Rebbe trained them. He taught them how to concentrate. He worked with them. The Mitteler Rebbe created his Chassidim. But he had hundreds of Chassidim. But it wasn't for the faint of heart or mind. It was incredibly intense. Unbelievably intense. If you were there, it was very exciting. It was very rich. They were in Gan Eden. Frierdiker Rebbe says that the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim were not missing Mashiach. Imagine, they had Mashiach in the Chassidus. And they didn't have money to buy bread. They were so poor. But in the Mitteler Rebbe's world, that nicht ausgefallen Mashiach, because the Mitteler Rebbe gave them so much. The Frierdiker Rebbe said again, but the Mitteler Rebbe gave them Chassidim, but kein Rebbe seine Chassidim should give. What the Mitteler Rebbe gave his Chassidim, no Rebbe gave. But the Pella is not what he gave, it's how he built up his Chassidim to be able to receive it.
But did he, like if we take his Chassidus now and learn it, then even though like we won't be able to learn it straight, like will we still can we like gain from it, or is
It's
it
the best. It's the best. You don't want to start this
will we be
conversation.
able to learn it, or
Of course, the Mitteler Rebbe Chassidus, it's incredibly interesting. And the Rebbe, the Shabbat Maimorim, the classic Maimorim, the Ayin Beis, the Samach Vav, it's all based on the Mitteler Rebbe. It's a whole conversation. I already had it in this series. You can go to my website. I have a whole class on it. The Rebbe, the Shabbat Maimorim, based on the Mitteler Rebbe. The Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus is very interesting. He explained and explained and explained and explained and explained. Anyway, the doctors told him he's not allowed to speak. And you have to assume that the reason they're not allowed to speak, the man had difficulty breathing, but he's been speaking. He never had a problem speaking when he said Chassidus. I don't know about the rest of it, but yeah. So the way the story is brought in Beis Rivka, we don't have this from the Rabbeim, but we have this from Chassidim. And a lot of the Chassidim who tell these stories will push it there. Witnesses. He went into a coma. Pasha went into a coma. He was not responsive. And he laid in this coma for about a week or two, whatever, for a meshach. And one doctor says to another doctor, watch, I will show you a wonder. I'll show you a miracle. Then he goes over to the Mitteler Rebbe and he whispers in the Mitteler Rebbe's ear that the doctors reconsidered and they decided that if he wants, he can speak Chassidus. So he sat up. And he asked they should put a big day Shabbos. I'm assuming he was very weak. I'm assuming it was hard to hear him, but he put on his Shabbos clothes. The Mitteler Rebbe, the first three Lihadus Rebbeim, on Shabbos and Yom Tov, they wore white silk. They looked like Malachim. He started to say, for a week he said Chassidus, not non-stop, but a lot. And the Chassidim didn't know what the world they were on. A minute before he's in a coma, a minute after he's speaking Chassidus, they were flying. They were very confused. They're obviously very afraid, but they were certainly enjoying the moment, Until it came the night of his birthday, Tes Kislev. And the Chassidim got together, and he said Chassidus, I think 3 times that night. I think we even have Maimorim. Hanocha has those Maimorim that are printed. He said one Maimed, then later he said a second Maimed. But during that night, something happened which blew the Chassidim's mind. It really freaked him out. The Mitteler Rebbe went into a dveikus. He went into a trance. Now, the Mitteler Rebbe's dveikus is famous. The Mitteler Rebbe's trances are well known. But as a rule, he did them in the privacy of his own room. I read someplace that when the Mitteler Rebbe was in a trance, he would be standing still, like a statue of marble, Pashat. The Gabbai would walk in and pick him up and move him around the room. He had no idea where he was. He was not here, Begashmit at all. People used to pay money to watch the Mitteler Rebbe in dveikus. He was not in this world. But he did it b'chadei chadorim. Now he had just been so sick, and now he's back. He's saying Chassidus, and in the shul, it was not in Lubavitch, it was with Nezhin. He went into a trance, and he was not responsive. And the Chassidim started to get nervous. It was probably a very long time. So he started to bang the chairs, they had to move the furniture, and he wasn't responding. So they pushed, started screaming. Imagine a room full of people screaming in fear, because the Rebbe entfetnished. The Rebbe's not here. Eventually he sat up. He came back. So they asked him, "Had the Rebbe gehet was mir am gesagt?" Did the Rebbe hear what we said? They were screaming that Chassidim cannot see this. We're not kalim for this. And the Rebbe is not allowed to do such things in public. He has to do it in the privacy of his room because Chassidim, we can't handle it. We're going crazy. We can't do it. It freaked them out. It really, really disturbed them. So they asked the Mitteler Rebbe, "Had the Rebbe gehört was mir am gesagt?" Did the Rebbe hear what we said? And the Mitteler Rebbe answered, "Yeah, ich hab gehört. Was tut azah grace in his shom in azah niedrige Welt?" That's what he said. I heard. What is such a great soul doing in such a lowly world? In other words, he was someplace else. He heard, but not what they said. Was tut azah heich in his shom in azah niedrige Welt? What is such a lofty soul doing in such a low world? He said, "Ich hab gehört." That's what he heard. And of course, the end of the story was that night he asked over and over again, "Im Allah hashachar," if it's morning. And I don't know this for sure, But the way I understand this story, and again, anytime a person is understanding a story, it's an opinion. The Frierdiker Rebbe makes it very clear that we know the exact moment of the passing away of each Rebbe. The exact moment of the passing of each Rebbe. Based on the Gemara, that the Gemara says, Ein Malchus Negas Bechaverta Filik Chut Hashayda. One kingship does not overlap with another kingship the width of a hair. They taught you that when you were children. When one actually it doesn't overlap. Which means we know the exact time of the Rebbe's Histalkus, the exact time of the Mitteler Rebbe's Histalkus. I assume we know the exact time of the Histalkus, although I don't know when that is. I heard when I was a boy that when the Frierdiker Rebbe collapsed, Tavshin Yud, he pointed at the clock. The last movement that he made, he pointed that it was 10 minutes to 8. That's what I heard. If it's true or not, I heard. But we know the exact moment of the Histalkus of the Rebbeim. And the Mitteler Rebbe planned on the Histalkus being when the morning started, Aleis HaShocher. So he kept on asking, Im Ola HaShocher. And they kept telling him, no, not yet. No, not yet. It was the middle of the night. So he started saying a Chassidus, and I think we have this Chassidus in Hanocha. In the Sefer Migdalei. Some is reprinted now in this Maimorim, but I don't know. And in the middle of the Maimed, he said the pasuk Ki imcha mekir chayim, Ki imcha mekir chayim. This is a pasuk which my mother Chassidus bring a lot. Ki imcha mekir chayim. You see, if you be guys and you would put on a talis, you would know. Mayakar, when you put on a talis, you're supposed to say Mayakar. I forgot the pasuk by heart. And part of what he says, there's a cute story that they had rules upstairs that you were not allowed to go into the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment unless you were married. So everybody was married. So the Rebbe and Chaim Mushka stood by the door, and as the guys would walk up, he would say, Zog Mayakar. Say the pasuk you say when you say a talis, no bacher knows Mayakar. Every guy knows Mayakar by heart. But anyway, with you is the source of life. So the Mitteler Rebbe said the first half of the pasuk, with you, and he translated from the source of all life, and he stopped speaking. So they waited. And they only realized a while later that that was Pasha de Histalkus. The Mitteler Rebbe passed away in middle of saying Divrei Elokim Chaim, Pasha Kipshut, Imcha Mekir Chaim Berchen Ereh. So the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe de Edom, the son-in-law, the Malamokim of the Mitteler Rebbe, wrote about his shver, about his father-in-law. We know the language from our Rebbe, the Rebbe de Shver. Kvei Kedush is made of Chami Admor. The Mitteler Rebbe, so that Tzemach Tzedek writes about his shver, about the Mitteler Rebbe, that a Histalkus like this has not happened since the times of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Rab Shimon Bar Yochai in Zayar, in the Idr Zutta, by Hazinu, what we learn on Lag Baimer, for those who do these things, said he called together the Chavraya Kadisha. The Rashbi had a chabur of 10 people who learned Kabbalah with him. And one time they got together to learn Seidus HaTorah, and while they were learning, 3 of them passed away. They floated the Shabbos up Lamaila. And there's my mother Chassidus that explained that it wasn't like Nadav and Avihu, that they did it in the middle of their life. Their lives were over, so they were allowed to let themselves go away. So the Ashbi calls the other guys back. Listen, let's do it again. Let's make another convention. Let's learn Prima Seder again. And this time I'm going to pass away. How much fun that is. Your Rebbe says, Kam lo me sich zusammen bleiben. I'll speak Chassidus and then Shom be'el harashmayim. But you can't argue with a Rebbe. You can't control them. Why? The Rebbe does what he has to do. So they came. And he said, Chassidus, you have 10 pages, 20 amudim of Zayar, 10 dafim of Zayar, which Seidus HaTorah, which were obviously not, they're written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's Talmud of Abba, who wrote the Sefer HaZayar. And the end of that story describes how Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, mitten Zogn Seder, he passed away, Shamon Apolamayla. It's a very dramatic story. He disappeared, then he reappeared, whatever it was. So the Mitteler passed away like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in the middle of saying Chassidus, surrounded by Chassidim. But not by 7 guys, by hundreds, by many people. In other words, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught Torah to the biggest tzaddikim, the Tanoim, what Shachas Tefnimis HaTorah. And we know their names. The Mitteler Rebbe had regular Chassidim, but he lifted them up through his Hidracha and through his Torah, and they were Caleb to hear Torah from the Mitteler Rebbe, and they were Zeichet to be at the Histalkus of the Mitteler Rebbe. That's why he passed away, Mitteler Rebbe's Histalkus. Now he kept on saying all night long, during that night, when he was saying Chassidus, that there should be besimcha. He kept on saying besimcha, which is exactly the same thing by Rabbi Shbi. He also wanted very much to be besimcha. This is why on Lag BaOmer, it's such a happy day, even though we're celebrating the Histalkus of Rabbi Shimon. It's a happy day because Rabbi Shimon said that the Histalkus of a tzaddik is an infant simcha, and there was a very big joy by Rabbi Shimon, and the same is true by the Mitteler Rebbe. So the way the story is told, and this story I don't know how I know, that they went to his levaya crying and singing the Rebbe Yesen Freilach Sein. The Rebbe Yesen Freilach Sein. This was the levaya. The Mitteler Rebbe passed away. Yud Tes Kislev Tovkuf Peches. And the way I understand it is that before, the reason his Chag HaGeula did not become the same thing like the Alter Chag HaGeula was because the time they were able to celebrate his Geula, in other words, when the government said, yeah, he's not a Ganef, but the Mitteler Rebbe, he's not a Ganef, he's an honest man, and the Risha Shebedavah, the Mitteler Rebbe, was after the Histalkus, so the Yom Tov never happened b'chayav, and after the Histalkus, it was a whole new situation. The Mitteler passed away. And they buried him in Nezhin. He's buried in Nezhin. I was by the scene of the Mitteler Rebbe. I was by the Alter Rebbe also. I got to tell you, when I came to the Mitteler Rebbe, I felt like he was saying, would you stinking it out? I felt like I was not welcome. By the other Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe doesn't want people around, the Mitteler Rebbe. But he's not buried alone. If you go to the Mitteler, go to Nezhin, you'll see that there's somebody else buried with him. The Alter Rebbe is also buried with somebody else. The Alter Rebbe is buried with his daughter, Freidke, as she's called. She passed away about 6 months after him, 5 months after him, and she's buried in the oil by her request. The Mitteler was buried in Nezhin, and many years later, his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, had a son named Bisol Neach, who was born before the Alter Rebbe passed away. Bisol Neach knew the Mitteler Rebbe. He knew, he must have been about 16 years old when the Mitteler Rebbe passed away, but Bisol Neach at 16 was not like you and I at 16, he was a Rebbe. He was a Gon and a Kodesh and a Tzaddik. He became a Rebbe in Nezhin after the Tzemach Tzedek passed away. They divided up into 4. One went to Kopust, one went to Liadi, one went to Nezhin, and one went to Lubavitch. The Rebbe Marash stayed in Lubavitch. When Nezhin passed away, they buried him with the Mitteler Rebbe in the oil. There are other people who are buried next to the Mitteler Rebbe, like Mitteler Rebbe, the son of Machon, who's buried with him, but he's buried outside the oil. Rabbi Solneach, if you go into Mitteler Rebbe's Tzion, there's 2, I don't even know if we know which one is which, but there's 2 spots, 2 kvorim. One is the Mitteler Rebbe's cave, and one is the cave of his daughter's son, the Mitteler Rebbe's grandson, Rabbi Solneach, who passed away, 50 years after his grandfather passed away, something like that. And they buried him, they put him in the Tzion, they put him in the oil, together with the Mitteler Rebbe. Now, it's very difficult to understand what it means for Chassidim to lose a Rebbe. It's impossible to fathom what it means Chassidim lose a Rebbe. I have a memory in my head which I'll never forget. It just eats at me, and I play this tape. Gimel Tammuz, Tov Shin Nun Dalet, which is now 30 years ago. A friend of mine, he was my age, he was in 770. I was American, he was Israeli, but we sat on the same bench. And he walked up to me by the Levaya, and he said to me, "It's the verstehe wie man gefühlt b'shas and shoya." He said, "Now I feel what it means to go through the Holocaust." I was shocked. I couldn't believe he said it. But I've had 30 years to digest it. He told me b'shas the Levaya. I remember it ad hayom hazeh. I wish I could repeat his name. I teach his kids. I can't tell it to them. He told it to me b'shas ma'aseh. It's a verstehe wie man gefühlt. In other words, to him, it was a Holocaust. And I couldn't believe a person would say such words. Chassidim losing a Rebbe is an unimaginable experience. Unimaginable experience. And you can't compare Rebbe to Rebbe. You know, who's a bigger Chassid, who's a greater Rebbe? Those are stupid questions. They really are foolish questions. A Rebbe is a real Rebbe, and that's all that matters. The Chassidim are Chassidim to the best of their abilities, you know. But to whatever extent this can be said, the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim, they were very dependent on the Mitteler Rebbe. Mitteler Rebbe spoiled them rotten. The Frierdiker Rebbe said what the Mitteler Rebbe gave his Chassidim, no Rebbe gave. No Rebbe gave. he took people. I'm sure they were intelligent, but he worked with them. He taught them how to learn. He taught them how to think. He taught them how to concentrate. The Frierdiker Rebbe says, Chassidim of the Mitteler Rebbe, to concentrate for 3-4 hours on a subject without losing their mindset was like taking a walk in a park. It was easy for them. He took human beings and he transformed them in the hundreds to tifa bali moichin. They lived in the world of Chassidus. You know, the Rebbe spoke about this in Nun Beis, that we know that the whole purpose of Chassidus is you learn Chassidus in your brain to bring it down to your heart. It should affect your actions. If a person learns Chassidus but doesn't do anything with it, doesn't daven with it, doesn't affect his life, so the Frierdiker Rebbe, you say, you better don't learn. You know, the Chassidus is not meant for philosophy and to entertain yourself. But the Rebbe spoke a number of times that there's a madrega of Machon b'yetzav, there's a madrega of Chabad, which is not for the heart, it's not for the action, it's just for the Chassidus by itself. And the Rebbe sort of implied that was the Mitteler Rebbe. The Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim, their brain was so deeply involved in Elikus that whether they were Mavada their Midas, they were not Mavada their Midas, they were great Chassidim, pasha from the brain. The Mitteler Rebbe lifted them up. It's very difficult to understand the pain and the withdrawal that they suffered. The Histalkus and Loss, they were so spoiled. It took the Tzemach Tzedek a time to become a Rebbe, a minimum of 6 months, a maximum of 5 years. There's a lot of different details about the Tzemach Tzedek's Kabbalas and Asiyas. The minimum amount of time was 6 months. He became a Rebbe in the beginning, Shavuos, Peiches, the Mitteler passed away in Kislev. Tzemach Tzedek became a Rebbe in Shavuos, and then it took a few more years, it's Peiches, but till Tzadik Beis, which is 4 years later, 4.5 years later, and then Asiyas was complete. Tzemach Tzedek hesitated to becoming a Rebbe. But the Mitteler Chassidim couldn't take it. Why? Tzemach Tzedek took Chassidus for half an hour, 40 minutes. Half an hour, 40 minutes was like an entree. It wasn't even a maimah to them. They were used to Chassidus for hours. And they could concentrate for hours, they could listen for hours. And you asked me before, was the Chassidus exciting? It was incredibly exciting for them. We wouldn't know where to put ourselves. They were in another universe. And I can't even imagine the kind of withdrawal that there was when the Histalkus and Mitteler Rebbe, because they needed him terribly. But this is how David plays the game, you know. This is der v'der shov, der manhigov. I'll tell you just a vart. I'm assuming it was Mem Hey, although I don't know this for sure. When I was in yeshiva, when I was a bacher, the Rebbe verbringt every year on Tes Kislev, every year Chav Cheshvan, and all the yard site and all the Yom Haletzim. He verbringt every year Tes Yud Kislev. And they used to write Hanochas, they would write transcripts of the Rebbe Siches. So they wrote in a Hanoch, I'm sure the Rebbe said the words by verbringing, he didn't make up the words. The Mitteler Rebbe is given a Nosi Bismani. The Mitteler Rebbe was a Rebbe in his generation. And the Rebbe got really upset, and he crossed it out, and he wrote Mohir, emergency, urgent. And then he wrote underneath it in very strong words, Mavil, shocking to say the Mitteler Rebbe was a Rebbe in his time. He crossed it out, and he wrote the Mitteler Rebbe is a Rebbe in his time. Is a Rebbe. Yeah, he is a Rebbe, but not was a Rebbe. And the Hasbara Sheba DovBer Bepashtas is that if you learn Chassidus of the Mitteler Rebbe is your Rebbe. And with every Rebbe brings something into the world. The Mitteler Rebbe's inyan was Recheves Hanor, to take every word of the Alter Rebbe and build out of it mountains and mountains of Chassidus. And if you learn the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus, you're connected to, in other words, it's not past tense. The gift that a Rebbe gives the world, in time it's limited. But in terms of Elikus doesn't finish. It's an endless thing. It's infinite. It doesn't have any limitation in time. But the Rebbe wrote that. Like he was unhappy. And I would bet that the Rebbe actually said those words. He said it. But the Rebbe didn't like that they wrote it down. That was a Rebbe, is a Rebbe. And he wrote it very strong. That even the Siyas is an Ian Nitzchi. And then there was the Levi. The Mitteler passed away. The Levi was in Nezhin. And then they looked for a Rebbe. They came back to Lubavitch. It's a whole story how the Tzemach Tzedek became a Rebbe, which is not our topic. Our topic is when we get to the Mitteler Rebbe. Mitteler Rebbe is the Siyas. What I want to do, I have a little time left, and maybe I'll have some time tomorrow, but when I have a little time left, I want to talk to you with the few minutes that we have left about the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim.
What does it mean that we have like 7 Rebbes? The Siyas doesn't end then why do we always say that the Rebbe's our Rebbe? Why don't we just say we have 7 Rebbe's? I mean, I know the Rebbe's our Rebbe. I'm saying, like, if you say it that way, it sounds like, but we don't have 7 Rebbe's. We have 1 Rebbe, and you shouldn't become the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassid. You should be the Rebbe's Chassid.
For sure. And that's a fact. It's a truism.
So what does it mean that the C is...
If someone decides that he likes the Mitteler Rebbe, it happens. You'd be surprised. It doesn't happen in Crown Heights, but it happens. I like the Mitteler Rebbe. Why? I like him. You can become a chassid of any Rebbe. It's foolish, because if you live today, the Eibush to put a Rebbe, a Nasi in our generation for today, and that's the Rebbe. And therefore, you have no. I mean, we learn the Chassidus more the Rabbeim. We celebrate, we commemorate, we study all the Rabbeim, but we have one Rebbe. There's no doubt about it. But the Rebbe wrote that anybody who engages with the Mitteler Rebbe is, for those few minutes, the Mitteler Rebbe's a chassid. You know that there's a Sikha, where the Rebbe told by Fabrengen, that a man walked out of the Frierdiker Rebbe's room, very excited. A chassid walked out of the Frierdiker Rebbe and very excited. And he saw the Rebbe in the hall. So he goes over to the Rebbe, to our Rebbe, he says very excitedly, I just went into the Frierdiker Rebbe, and I told the Frierdiker Rebbe that I want to become a kusher to the Alter Rebbe. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said to him, Sei me kusher mit mir, wirst du mele, sei me kusher mit die, mit welcher ich bin me kusher. Which means be connected to me, and you'll automatically be connected to those with whom I am connected. So the Rebbe repeated this whole thing, and then he said, Ich hab nicht gewollt jenem abkühlen. I didn't want to cool off his excitement. He says, but I have only one Rebbe. Who the Frierdiker Rebbe connects me to, it's his department. He said, I didn't want to take away his enthusiasm, but why do I'm connected to the Frierdiker Rebbe. Beyond that, it's not my concern. The Frierdiker Rebbe connects me to this. It's immaterial. That's what the Rebbe said. So Beidit, both things are true. Both things are true. Anyway, you have a couple of minutes. I'll talk about the Chassidim and the Mitteler Rebbe. You know what? I'm going to let you go, really. I'll let you go. I'll do it tomorrow. Okay. I'll let you go. I'm not going to stay.